sales is all about relationship. There's a huge market in the relationship building. Negotiations start from the first moment you connect. Tell people what you're struggling with and invite them to solve this problem with you. Discretionary goodwill is what drives companies forward, creating teams that really pull for common purpose.
Hello and welcome to the Success Differently podcast. My name is Michelle Sorgaroli and I'm your host today, and we are being joined by Vladimir Bushin. Now, you are in for a real treat. I'm so excited about our conversation today. Vladimir came to us from Russia in 2006. He immigrated to the US, and in 2017, he became a proud citizen of the US of A. Since that time, he has founded Bushin Consulting, which is a firm focused on really exploring conversations from the place of trust, rapport building, influence, and negotiation. He works with teams, and he's on a mission to make sure that people's lives are better and to change people's lives for the greater, better communications. Now, Vladimir has been featured on ABC, NBC, CBS, among other news channels as well. And he has a robust following on LinkedIn for those of you who are interested in following him there. He is an absolutely committed communicator from any avenue and path that you could consider. He is certified in agile coaching. He is certified in ethical influence. He is certified in crucial conversations, among others. Those are just a few highlights for you. He is also a founding member of the Cialdini Institute and a master host nonetheless, of the Negotiating Practice community. Vladimir, as you can see from all the books on his shelves behind him, he is an avid reader, and I challenge you to find a book he hasn't read, because I've tried, and so far I'm coming up empty. And in his spare time, Vlad likes to hike and to windsurf. And we are so privileged to have you here joining us today. Thank you, Vlad, for being with us for the next 45 or 50 minutes.
Thank you, Michelle. It's a pleasure and a privilege to be here.
Oh, I'm delighted.
I appreciate it.
Is there anything in your introduction that you might like to add or change that you'd like to highlight for us today?
Yeah, thank you for your introductions. It's great. And yes, this is what I'm passionate about. I'm passionate about improving communication skills, and there is a reason for that. So if you want to hear my story, in the beginning of my career and pretty much before I started to get interested in negotiation, I sucked at negotiation and communication, and it was so difficult, and I grew up in the environment where assertiveness was the tool number one, and everybody wanted to, push you, through, push you out, push you, and get what they can get. And it's a mindset of scarcity, essentially. It's a mindset of like, I get it or I lose it. And it hurt me all along throughout my life. And at some point, I started to, I got puzzled about, like, it could be a better way. And one of the biggest events in my life was immigration. And I immigrated to Minnesota, and if we compare the culture in Russia and the culture in Minnesota, it's a day and night. And especially, I lived in a big city in St. Petersburg, Russia, and it's a busy city and a lot of competitive feelings there. But in Minnesota, people, even on the road, people driving with different style. They so much respect, so much patience there, like you can compare.
Interesting.
Maybe the only thing that Americans can compare is New York, where people honk you like right away and they stop.
It's the music on the streets in New York.
Right, exactly. So in Minnesota, culture is completely different, and I had to adapt. It was a culture shock for me, and I had a lot of thoughts about how to roll better, and also I had my own challenging, difficult, and painful lessons in Russia that I had to learn about communication, about building relationships. When I was a manager, it was very challenging. So I was actually demoted I was demoted to a non-managerial position because my superior said, "You cannot be a manager. You horrible manager. You're horrible with people. Everybody hate you." And I thought, like, my career is now crashed. I will never be a manager.
And so just for our listeners, when was that sort of timing wise in your journey?
Yeah, it's very interesting. It's timing pretty much prior to my immigration.
Okay.
And I came to work for a company that was American with the daughter company in Russia, and I came to work there. And at that time, software development was
Mm,
booming, and everybody wanted to do something. Mobile started to boom, and we started to develop products in this company that was very beneficial for American market.
mhm,
And our superiors in the United States, they hired someone in Russia to put together a team do that. And our team start to grow as investments start to grow, and our
right.
team start to grow. And I was one of the first people in this company. Like, there were four of us initially, and then, of course, I as a kind of original gangster, I become a manager. Who else? And they put me as a manager, and I start to work with people. And soon I found out that working with people is way harder and than it seems. And it's not about knowing technical stuff. It's about communicating and getting their support, and uh, just balancing between different needs of different people. And it was not so easy. And I failed
Mm,
miserably. I was demoted. And I thought, like, okay, my career is crashed. So now I need to start over. I need to, and all of a sudden, the opportunity came in. And the reason that the opportunity came in is because I wanted to immigrate long ago, and I wanted to live in America because for me, software was equal America. Software
ah,
equals America
okay.
because in Russia there's so much piracy, or it was before so much piracy. I didn't see that how a software company can survive in Russia because of so much piracy. And I thought, like, I need to immigrate, and I started to learn English. And I was told later that in the office I was the only one who could speak as good English to communicate with the clients in the
Mhm.
United States. So clients actually brought me to the United States,
Nice.
and I came to Minnesota and I started to work as a business analyst, as a requirements engineer in the American office, bridging
Right.
that gap of language. And I wrote a lot documentation in English, and of course I started to uh, speak English even better. But the point
Mm.
is that if I was not demoted, and if I was a good manager there, I would I would never immigrate through that.
Isn't that
So
the truth? We often hear, some version of your pain becomes your purpose. It's because our pain, or as you said, it hurt you and you crashed, you were demoted. These are the times when our lessons and our opportunities face us. They sort of show up right there on the end of our nose, don't they? And they highlight our opportunity. When you said, I think that's curious, you said software equals America, and you were bridging not just cultures, but language, but also software, which is just so hardware, if you will, and people who are so different, right? That bridge, it sounds like you've been bridging for quite a while, especially in those early years. Hmm?
yeah, and well, the first attempts, first failures, and then of course the software engineering is by itself is very fascinating, part of it. And uh, but putting together a big project, and I was managing a project as big as $50 million and 100 people later in my career.
Hmm.
But in order to get there, you really need to get support from people, and especially from your
Hmm.
superiors
Hmm.
um, and peers. So you need to know how to talk to people, and you need to be savvy about uh, corporate communication, corporate culture.
Hmm.
And I'm not saying that I was the best. I just kept learning. But at some point, I decided I just want to focus on it. I just want to focus on
Yeah.
uh, how people speak and what it takes to connect with people, what it takes, what builds rapport. Rapport, by the way, was a completely foreign name word for me, and there
Hmm.
is no equivalent in Russia of rapport. So imagine there is a whole nation who lives and doesn't know what rapport is.
Yeah, so this is a really interesting piece for me because coming from software, you said you noticed that communication was a big part of leading people and getting groups. A lot of people in software might choose to not go that path, not become a leader and change their direction. Some people will avoid that path. And so I'm curious, what drew you into working with people as opposed to working with software? What was it that kind of captured your
Yeah.
passion?
Yeah, I guess my inability to speak to people well, and I tried to solve the problem. So
Ah,
I wanted to get better. I wanted to uh, be better at gaining support from people, making agreements, gaining their agreements, and negotiation is all about making
mm,
agreements, by the way.
mhm,
Maybe I don't know if it sounded in my introduction, so loud, but Camp Negotiations is the company that I work with, and they have a wonderful system of
mhm,
how people make agreements, not based on haggling and struggling, but more on building bridges, building relationships, and creating the vision of value,
mhm,
creating the vision of a problem, and solving it, and also being very aware of the what the emotional problems are in the way.
mm,
Because in order to solve a problem, like the tangible problem, let's say sales, um, quota or sales goals, you need to go through multiple steps
yeah.
in your sales process in order to close the sale, and and it's called sales funnel. Of course, many people know that. So sales doesn't happen in an instant. You need to actually create the path,
Mhm,
and that path includes different stages. And
mhm,
one of the biggest one is the figuring out the common interest, common value, and how do you add value, and how can you become a partner for another company to support them in the long run, not just sell and run, but
mhm.
how do you actually sustain that relationship and continue evolving that together with the product. And many companies rely on that. So there's a huge market in the relationship building.
Right. I mean, it's one of the things I just love about you is you have two major pillars that I see. It's relationships and value, right? And how do you bring those together? And for you, I can hear so loud and clear that relationships are a major, major driver for you. I'm wondering when you're in software, it's an interesting journey to move from software into a focus on relationships. And I recognize and I hear that your failures, if you will, or your pains initiated that interest. What is it that you are most driven to? You're obviously an avid learner. You're studying the human dynamics in multiple different channels, and you're clearly a master in your craft. I'm very, very curious about what it is about relationships specifically that inspires you.
Um, yeah, it's a very good question. And I was asking myself this question many times. And what I found, I try to compare myself, as we all do. We compare
Mm,
ourselves to others, and I compared the approach as well. I think the first, maybe the first spark was I read an article on the internet, and that was actually in Russian, and that article was how to stand up for yourself respectfully. And later on, and I will explain later what that means. Later on, I learned about crucial conversations. A crucial conversation. This is this one red book behind me.
Mm-hmm.
This is a bestseller uh, from. Let me show you. The 4 million copies sold from Joseph Graney and company. It's a brilliant book, and essentially, it's talk about the fool's choice. And the fool's
The
choice,
fool's choice. Okay.
yeah, the fool's choice is when you face a challenging problem and you want something and it doesn't work this way, or somebody's not accountable, or something doesn't go your way.
Mm-hmm.
There are, it seems like you have two choices: whether you be completely straightforward and upfront about this, but that damages the relationship. So you go and you tell what you want and you tell what's on your mind, but that actually offends people. Or
Right.
another choice would be to keep quiet and tolerate that
Mm.
and keep the relationships and
Mm-hmm.
pretend that everything is all right.
Yeah. And those seem to be the two choices, the
Yeah,
black and white, right? So
right.
what do they do?
Is
What do you do instead?
right. Is there any other choice?
Mm-hmm.
Is there any other choice? So essentially, the, the crucial conversation is about that there is another choice. You need to submit to this fool's choice. And that
Mm.
article was about how to stand up for yourself respectfully, which means how can you how can you really let people know where the boundaries are, what your expectations are without breaking the relationships.
Mm.
And it's an art of making people, keeping people feel good about the
Mm-hmm.
relationships and understanding your intent and understanding that preserving the relationships,
Right.
not crossing that line when
Mm.
you get into the zone of not liking, because liking has a liking one of Cialdini principles, it's a halo effect. Once you're on the wrong side, you become worse and worse. So don't go there.
Try to avoid that. Yeah, exactly. Oh,
Exactly. But at the
yeah.
same time, you need to put the problem on the plate. You need to actually tell people what you're struggling with and
Yeah.
invite them to this problem with you or solve this problem for you,
Mm. Mm-hmm.
and make it so diplomatic that people will not be offended, but on the opposite, they will appreciate, like, uh, very simple example. I don't know, how would you address that, your spouse snoring, right? You might just say like, stop snoring, right? This is one thing,
Mm-hmm.
but you can diplomatically approach that without being abrasive. How not to be abrasive but being effective. And crucial conversations proposes a structure. Crucial conversations could be applied to family life, and I think it's uh, mostly created for corporate
Mm-hmm.
world, and those scenarios, but it could be applied everywhere. But negotiations goes further than that.
Mm-hmm.
Negotiations is not about not just conflict resolution. Negotiations when you need to get there, build the relationships, and make agreements.
Mm-hmm.
People who maybe before that they didn't even consider you at all and didn't know you at all.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. You're really nuancing. I love hearing this. You're nuancing there's the relationship first, and then there's the skills around building that um, the collaborative approach, if you will, to whatever that problem is, and then the negotiation comes after. So I sort of feel like there's relationship, then influence, if you will, and then negotiation, or there seems to be there's very specific nuances in terms of what has to come first. You talked about rapport. Um, and it being a new word for you, let alone a new experience for you in America, right? I'm coming back to rapport and trust. So the journey I'm seeing, I'm just curious about this because I'm just mapping it out in my own head and I'm not even sure if I've got it right, but I'm seeing rapport and trust, and then there's influence and then negotiation. Is that how do these build on each other, or do they? I'm
Okay.
curious.
So before we kind of put this together in a sequence, we need to understand what negotiation is. Like
Great.
when I say the word negotiation, what comes to mind?
Having a conversation with someone to try to decide on how you're going to solve the problem going forward. It's more of a partnership or a collaborative and exercise to my mind.
To solve a problem, to come to an agreement.
Hmm.
Okay. So when you say having a conversation, and that's a great definition, I would add a little bit more to that. So according to camp negotiations, the definition is negotiation is an effort to make an agreement
Mm,
where each of
nice.
the party between two or more parties, it could be many parties,
Right.
right? Where each of the party has a right to veto.
Hmm.
So what does it mean? They feel
Mm,
free to go and say
right.
no and go away and without any consequences.
Yeah. That's a
And
powerful piece, isn't it? The right to veto,
oh, absolutely. So
especially in an effective negotiation, I would imagine.
yeah, absolutely. I think Nelson Mandela said that slaves cannot get into agreement because they cannot say no. They
Mm-hmm.
cannot make agree. They cannot get into contracts. They cannot make contracts because
Yes,
they
of
are not
course.
they are not powerful enough to choose, right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
negotiations are when people have right
Mm,
to choose, and it is so important. So some people think like when negotiating, they need a leverage. What leverage? What they think leverage is. When I say leverage, what comes to mind, Michelle?
oh, it's something I can use to influence my position, to
Right? Or
enhance
influence.
my position. For example, if I have leverage, I have something at my disposal that I can use to give me a favorable advantage. That's how I
Give
would
you
see leverage.
okay. If we would take your definition to extreme, we would say it's some advantage that you have that will force people to say
Mm.
yes to you.
Okay.
How can you force people to say yes, right? And so many people, when they
Mm.
don't have that, they give up and they say like, I don't have any leverage. I cannot negotiate. How can negotiate with somebody who can walk away? But this is the essence of negotiation. When you have a quote quote leverage and you start forcing others, compelling others into your will, it's not a negotiation.
Right. Exactly. It's more influence, or even not even influence necessarily.
It's
It's just force, right?
it's just forcing people to do
Yeah.
what you want
Uh,
because of a threat. And negotiations quite opposite. In negotiate camp negotiations based on removing threat completely.
mhm.
And even why the books, the famous books start with no. Again, I bought it in Russia, and that's name in Russian. It's translated, but it's translated from Start with No by Jim Camp.
Mhm.
And this book is so contra, contra, controversial. It's so refreshing. It says
Mhm.
you need to actually encourage people to say no. So, for example, Michelle, if I talk to you and say, Michelle, if I say something wrong,
Mhm.
please feel free to say that. I will
Right.
not be offended. If something is not right with you, with
Mm.
what I say for you, it doesn't align with your values, feel free that it doesn't fit your purpose.
Mhm.
It will be absolutely fine. And if I state something, let I will let you interrupt me and correct me, right? So I am creating the safe environment for you to negotiate with me, absolute comfort. And if you make a deal, I say, Michelle, feel free to walk away at any time.
Oh my
That's
gosh.
that's totally fine.
Yeah, this is I'm appreciating the trajectory of your learning over the last 20 years or so. I can't even imagine the trajectory of your learning and how you've taken um, the conversation patterns, perhaps, that you were brought up with, and how you have transitioned those into what it is, who you are today, and how you have conversations today. I'm curious, Vlad, um, what is my question? I'm just trying to get a sense of what's been either the biggest impact or the greatest learning, or how have you changed? What's something that you might highlight in that transition and change in you in the last 20 years?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm very happy that you asked me because there is something that I'm really passionate about.
Mm.
And I learned about one concept from this book, and this concept called nurturing. I will put it back for now so everybody could see it. And by the way, this is a recent book from Jim Camp Jr., my mentor and partner business. And
Oh,
this book lead from now. And Jim is a brilliant. He's a master of one thing. It's called nurturing, and this is what I
nurturing.
learned, nurturing. So it's maybe some people may say this is a beaten word, like some cliche word, but for me it makes a lot of deep sense.
Yeah.
And I even created the course. It's called 7 Levels of Nurturing.
Mm.
What this course is about how to make conversations deeper and more
Mhm.
meaningful, and how to connect with people on many levels.
Mm.
When I worked in corporate, I had one of my managers was a brilliant guy. Um, his name is Harish Manipali, and he actually did a lot for me. He sent me to some trainings that propelled my career. He took me on a tour to the customers, and he talked to me a lot. And he said one time we went together, and he said to me. Um, we went on a tour. We appeared to be in one city, and we rented a car. But there was another guy, and he was that guy was Indian, and we decided to share the car. And they started to talk between each other. And then Harish said to me, "You know, Vlad, I can connect with Indian people so much easier because we share the culture, and we go into the deep conversation with them very, very quickly. But American
Mm.
people are more closed up and really hard to really get to beyond like what's the weather today."
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
it kind of sparked the the thought in me that how, we need to make conversations deeper. We need to actually understand each other on a levels deeper than circumstantial. And I start to think about like what is deeper than circumstantials. That may be logic. What's deeper than logic? Probably emotions. What's deeper than emotions? And I create the 7 level stack where you can have a conversation and connect
Mm.
with people gradually going in. And as you go through the levels, you build trust because
Right.
people get comfortable on that level
Mm.
and they get comfortable to go to the next level.
Mhm. Mhm.
But when I created that model, so many things started to come together because that opened up the thoughts about, for example, being vulnerable. What does it do when you become vulnerable? And at which level you become vulnerable. For example, I can tell you a story about my failure at work and how I felt. And if I mention to you during that story that it felt horrible, I was so
Yeah.
down, I felt like my whole world getting ruined. We are on emotional level here.
Right.
And I know that. We know we are connecting on emotional level. If
Mhm.
I start to mention to you I really wanted to be a manager. I was so aspired to go to the United States. I wanted to grow. I wanted to succeed. We are now on a deeper level. We are on an aspirational level.
Mm.
And you go with me because you start to contribute to that conversation and maybe share some of yours.
Right.
So this
Yeah.
is how connection happens. And when we leave the conversation, you feel that you know me for years, though we only talk for half an hour. Make sense?
It does. Yeah, it's beautiful. So, as you think about the conversations you've had and the conversation you had at 25, 30 years ago, earlier in your career, to the conversations you're having today, what do you notice most for yourself in your experience?
You mean that uh, what is the difference between
Yeah.
when I talked before and
How are
I'm
you
talking?
different? Yeah. How are you
Oh,
different
okay,
today?
how I changed.
Mm.
I think that. and I like to think about this, and maybe I'm still working on this. First of all, I start to listen more
Mm,
because I would say, and when we talk about listening is not just keeping your mouth shut. Listening is about focusing on the other person
right.
and figuring out what they're going through,
Mm,
and and even figuring out what they feel about it.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
And when you really try to feel what they feel at that moment, what they're talking about, then you need to tell them what you feel, but not
mm,
like what I feel. You need to tell them what they feel.
mm-hmm. Like me right now, I'm feeling privileged actually to have this opportunity to hear that little snippet from you. I feel like I've just noticed even in our tenor, everything slowed down. It went a little deeper.
Of course.
Um, yeah, we're just getting a little, yeah, it's lovely. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah.
I feel
Sounds like
that.
you're you're excited about what you hear, and
Mm.
you've tried to find the reflection in your life, and you getting your aha moments about that.
Yes, and for me, my when I love having conversations like this. I love having conversations like this because we get to go places that are the connection's deeper. It's more genuine. It's more real, and then we get to. I love seeing people. Underneath who you are, I can see and I can feel in you, Vlad. Like I felt this from the first time that we met. Just such a deep and genuine kindness and warmth, and there's a connection that you are not just striving for, but really studying to create
Yeah.
in any relationship that you have. And I experienced that from the very first time I experienced you in any kind of dialogue. So as we're talking about that now, um, you're just again demonstrating your commitment to that amazing level of communication. And I can't help but think that holy mackerel, so many people are gifted with conversations with Vlad.
Thank you. I
Mm,
appreciate that, Michelle.
hmm
And you're absolutely right. That is the goal. And I
mm,
think this is unique because so many people act that they don't care.
right.
Uh, bu-
Yeah.
Busy, preoccupied with something, focused on, and the conversation become very shallow. And the conversation become infrequent. They become just a number on some web page,
Right. Yeah.
but it's not. There's a lot of power in the connection. It's a lot of power in the relationship.
hmm
And
Exactly.
when we get back to your question, like what's the sequence, right? So you said like where does negotiation starts? So negotiation starts if you're talking about this is a conversation, and you said that this is a conversation about arriving to some agreement with some people who may say no, and they're independent, they free to choose, right?
hmm
So I would say negotiations start from the first moment you connect.
Yeah.
That's you you start to create something together right there.
Right. Exactly. Even just through a conversation, right?
Of
You're
course.
negotiating. It's like a dance. You're
Exactly.
negotiating in the conversation at all points. And to your point, this nurturing sequence, right? The seven layers, as I'm learning from you, and I appreciate this, that the seven levels when we're entering the negotiation or any kind of conversation, we're negotiating at every level to invite a deeper level,
Mhm.
right? That's what
Yeah,
I'm sensing is that we're maybe it's not an overt negotiation, but maybe an invitation, and we're saying, hey, are you ready for this? Do you want to go here? And that kind of thing in a conversation. And that's where things get
yeah,
really interesting.
exactly. So when we look at negotiation on a shallow level, we may say, hey, our company is doing web design. Do you want it?
Right.
It's a very circumstantial, logical. It's like on the surface,
Mm-hmm.
and people on the surface may have, you know, a lot of things going on,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and that message doesn't resonate. And when you go to a deeper level, when you say you want to be the best in the industry and showing an example, that's your value and that's your purpose. Or you say like your value is to and your purpose to help people differentiate themselves, for example, as a differentiation coach. When I tap into these values, there are a lot of things that needs to be done.
Mm-hmm.
And then I say, well, I create well, I don't create web design. I just use it as an example. And I say, how can we make a web design that will differentiating you more?
Mm-hmm.
Right? So now I'm not talking to you about, hey, I'm just creating web design.
Right.
I am aligning with your purpose to differentiate. And when I talk to you on that level, it is more meaningful for you. And when I
Mm-hmm.
start to talk about who you are and I remind you like you are a differentiation coach who changed people's lives, how can
Mm-hmm.
we create, how can we change people's lives? How can we start create change people's lives through your first presence, through the
Right.
first contact with you, which is your website?
Mm-hmm. It's interesting.
Now,
Yeah.
now you start to think like, oh, it aligns with who I am. Is
Right.
identity. Identity is like the sixth level. It's like deep level.
Mm-hmm.
The only deeper level there is the level of meaning, like what meaning you make of life. And
Right.
to get there, we need to have a deep conversation about this. It's not a cold call, but
Yeah.
but you need to get to know each other in order to, negotiate. When you negotiate,
Mm-hmm.
you're not forcing, you're opening up opportunities, essentially.
Absolutely. It's interesting that absolutely, as talking about differentiation, I find myself curious because when we're in differentiation is essentially about standing out, creating a differentiation from being different from others so that you're unique and your value shows up differently. And at the same time, that can create distance, that can create boundaries or blocks in a relationship that people are nervous about, right? When you want to be part of the group and then you want to stand out at the same time. So in your practice, where do you see this push pull, if you will, with differentiating your value and really standing in a respectful position of who you are, and at the same time moving into a more collaborative relationship? How does that factor in your work with clients?
Yeah, that's a very important question, and um, I probably should give more thought about this. I'm kind of answering off the cuff. Um, First thing that comes to my mind, but I think that I need to think about this more and
Mm,
and polish this thought and create more consistent idea about this. The first thing that comes to my mind is I would really like to get away from the concept of um, concept of creating leverage and creating vision.
mm,
Um, Instead of creating leverage, I would say like I would like to run away from creating leverage.
mhm,
I would like to avoid um, using power
mhm,
whatsoever. There's no place in
mhm,
negotiation for power. So
mhm. Agree.
even if you are a CEO in a corporation and you want to, get your way, it's 100% better
Mhm,
to negotiate with your staff and let them see the problem and let them help you to solve the problem,
mhm.
and maybe let them help you to see your own problem better rather than just forcing them to do what you want and then find out that they lose such a valuable thing. It's a subtle thing, but it's very valuable called discretionary goodwill.
Yeah, absolutely.
Discretionary goodwill is what drives companies forward,
Mm-hmm.
creating teams that really pull for common purpose.
Yeah, that's actually what I just wrote down. This concept of leverage is it's a power play in a sense. And
Yeah,
what I'm hearing is getting away from leverage and moving towards alignment,
yeah,
right? Moving everything towards alignment to the finding where are we in sync, or where do we think alike, or where do we bring our skill levels to a common purpose?
mhm,
How can we come together? And even just speaking about differentiation, that's in part where if differentiation is seen as an isolation, or in a negotiation or in a value proposition or as a leader or whatever, if we're trying to stand out, we're missing when we're using the opportunity to stand out. What happens is we create distance in that relationship. So we want to be uniquely valuable, but we don't want to create distance at the same time. We want to be uniquely valuable and create alignment
yeah.
rather than come from a leverage or a power
Mhm.
position or a power play. That's what that's kind of where I'm going with this. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, that's very good. That's a very good way to put it. When I think about distance, um, I cannot really grasp this concept of a distance.
Mm,
What's in your mind? Uh, because when I think about distance, it means kind of like a barrier between you and
mhm,
somebody else. That's a distance.
exactly.
So that
Hmm.
means you cannot cross this line.
That's
Like
right.
this is like where you stop, and after this, I will not let you,
Right.
let you in. I will not let you decide. You become
Hmm.
powerless in my power zone,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm. Hmm.
You can go up to
Agreed.
here, and that's it. And that feeling is essentially a feeling of defensiveness.
Hmm.
It's a feeling of losing power,
Right.
and that's a feeling of not knowing how to deal with some of the misalignments, or not not understanding how to deal with that effectively, spending too much time on that, or uh, uh, maybe feeling that you will never find that common ground with someone.
Hmm.
That's a feeling. So from this perspective, it pretty much means lack of connection,
Yeah.
and also lack of skill to enable those values in the other person, or surface those values in the other person that are the same in you. Kind of, here's the principle of liking comes in from Dr. Cialdini, finding those common values
Hmm.
on which you can build the relationship that you want to build.
Hmm.
And and by the way, if you want to have a dramatic, if you want to have a dramatic story, so many people actually don't stop speaking to their relatives, and they don't speak to father or mother or maybe sibling. Yeah, and that happened to me too, because I
Mm.
have an older brother, and he's 6 years older than me, and I didn't speak to him for a few years because I was not in the right relationship with him, and I was offended by how he come across. He probably was uncomfortable with me too, because how I reacted to that.
Hmm.
But at some point, I understood what's the problem. I called him and I talked to him for 15 minutes,
Mm.
and healed that relationship. And I explained him that I was afraid on this and this and this. And I said, like, when you say this and this and this, I feel that and that, and that makes me feel like I want to run away. And this is my defense mechanism because I'm afraid what's going to happen next. And I completely healed that. I talked to my brother now for a few years, and everything is fine. And he knows now where the boundaries are. I didn't need to force that.
Right.
On the opposite, I find a way to agree with him,
Yeah.
if and negotiate, if you would.
That's beautiful. I'm
Yeah,
so grateful that you shared that story because we see now the whole arc of your how this training and learning and focus on communication has impacted you personally on a very, very personal level with your brother.
Absolutely.
And I can only imagine that you're having that same kind of impact with your clients and the people who have the privilege of working with you. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. Do we have more
wonderful.
time, Michelle?
Changing lives. We're getting close. I have time, but yeah, we're getting close. I just want to really highlight, when we talk about how has your life changed, it sounds
Completely.
like you're right, completely, completely. And moving, it's just been such a delight to hear how going from a place where rapport wasn't even a word,
Mhm.
and coming into a place now where you were able to repair a very, very broken personal relationship, and also moving into what you're doing for the teams that you work with and creating those kind of beautiful relationships and opportunities for more
Yeah.
alignment, more communication, more values, more purpose
And
driven.
yeah, let's put it out there. Sales is all about relationships. So you cannot really build any business with those people who you don't have relationships. There
Exactly.
should be trust. There should be trust between you and the other person. There should be trust between your company and their company.
Hmm.
And if there is a lack of that, people will hesitate. They will make a step back.
Hmm.
And the goal of negotiation and influence, and Dr. Cialdini wrote a wonderful book, Influence, also a bestseller, over 5 million sales. It's about how to create that environment, that connection, where business can really be be uh, be a possibility. And by the way, when I coach sales represent sales professionals, oftentimes, if not every time, the problem is in how they communicate, how they come across, what they say and what they don't say.
Mm.
And in many cases, they want to have leverage. They want to
Right.
push.
Exactly.
They want to push through. They
Hmm.
want to overcome the obstacle. Even the language that they use when they prepare for that, is how to overcome objections. Like, you don't need to overcome objections. This is a wrong way to go.
Exactly, exactly. Overcoming objections is creating distance.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not working. That's beautiful. So, one last question for you. If you were starting out as a negotiation person today, what advice might you give someone who's just starting this journey in negotiation and influence?
Um, I would say I would say start practicing, because
Mm.
what what really shifted my skills is that I founded the negotiation practice community. I'm a co-founder of negotiation practice community. There's another person who is my co-founder, and on March 15th, actually, we turned 5 years.
Oh my
So
goodness.
there are people who come to the negotiation practice community and they practice, and every day there is a session. It was a session on Monday, but our one of our hosts actually stepped down recently, so we're looking for a new one. But um, every every other day except Monday, we have a negotiation practice, so people can come and practice their reflective listening. Hugely valuable.
Mm.
We practice the managing emotions and getting into the flow state, and
Yeah.
getting the other person in the flow state with you
Right.
when you solve a
Amazing.
problem.
Yeah.
So we have a session on the real negotiation preparation. When somebody comes and says, like, I have a meeting tomorrow with my boss, or I have a meeting with a partner,
Mm.
what do I say? How do I? And we sit together and we brainstorm and we practice how it's going to work, right? We do,
Beautiful.
and we have a crucial. So we used to have crucial conversations. Now we no longer have it, but we have camp negotiations and never split the difference practice by Chris Ross tools, and we also have a bulletproof. It's kind of like you're not negotiating them, but we kind of brushing them off politely and in a funny way, so they stop attacking you.
That's amazing. Yeah. So lots of opportunities. So you're really just highlighting, walk your talk as you have done, just do the reps.
So
Just
negotiation,
practice.
yeah, negotiation is a human performance skill, like
Yeah.
riding the bicycle, like swimming,
Mhm.
like dancing. You
Mm.
cannot really learn that by reading a book.
Right.
And you cannot really learn that by just going and dancing.
Right.
If you just go and dance, you will just learn what other people know. But
Hmm.
if you go to a community, if you go with a coach who will train you how to dance on a professional level, it's a completely different story. And I recently met one of my colleagues, and he said I had an agency where I bought media for some of the companies, and I also took a negotiation course,
Yeah.
and I got so good at the media, and also took their course. So I was expert in media, selling media,
Hmm.
the TV, the radio, and then the newspaper, whatever. And I
Hmm.
got good at negotiation, so I could make best deals with
Yeah.
them. And
Yeah.
they even give me kudos for giving me best deals. And he said, I'm surprised. So many agencies
Hmm.
who just want to take money out of the pocket of the client and pay and don't negotiate at all.
Right.
And,
Yeah.
and he said, I'm surprised. I could do 3 times more than them.
Amazing. Beautiful. So for people who want to increase their influence in negotiation, where might they be able to find you, Vlad? Where's the best place to connect with
Negotiation
you?
practice community, of course. And if you Google that, and also you can come to my website, Bushin Consulting, or businessrelationshipscoach.com. So you can find it there. But negotiation practice community, I can give you a link, Michelle, and
Sure.
maybe you can attach this link. So people are welcome. First month is free, and after that is $29 a month, which is nominal. I mean, there's
Wonderful.
so much value there, and
Mm,
if you're doing deals, it makes extra tens of thousands of dollars, and you can learn it there for just $29 a month. It's just amazing.
amazing. Amazing. Well, this is all about your purpose in supporting people to have better lives. And it sounds like, as you've done, it's all through effective communication. So
Absolutely, absolutely.
thank you so much, Vlad. It has been an absolute joy. Thank you for sharing your stories and your wisdom. I'm grateful for our conversation today. Thank
Thank
you.
you so much, Michelle, for having me. The great questions and very inspiring conversation.